I guess I could.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another segment of Asaph Cafe. And through the magic of green screen technology, we are on the moon. Isn't that a beautiful shot? And I'm wearing a Liberace costume. I'll explain that more. And on my left, we have the lovely Jessie Smith. She is an illustrator, and she does portraits and watercolors, and we'll be talking about that. And on my further left, we have Mr. Nathan Stuvee, and he is interested in green screen filming and nature and photography. So I think this will be a fun between you two and this dinner, Sinatra dinner music, I call it. Maybe name that tune somewhere later on. So let's start with the familiar theme song. See if you know this song. Have you ever heard it?
I know it. I can't think of the title though.
I'll play it for you.
Yeah.
You recognize it, Jessie?
I don't.
What you do?
I recognize the melody, absolutely, but I can't think what it is.
I'll give you a hint. A famous trumpeter made it famous. Still don't know, huh? This is the melody.
I might not know where it's from originally, maybe. Okay.
I'll play for both and I'll give you the history real quick. We'll get a song for you. Don't worry.
Okay.
Another hint. Tijuana Brass.
Herb Albert made it famous.
Yes, yeah, that's it, right. And here's the conclusion. And that's the conclusion. That's the entire song.
It's a pretty song.
It's
Yes,
the
it
melody.
is. Okay, the name of the song is called This Guy's in Love with You. And when women sing it, they say This Girl's in Love with You. A famous composer named Burt Bacharach wrote that song about 40 years ago. And a famous trumpeter named Herb Albert, I don't know if you ever heard of him, Herb Albert and Tijuana Brass. Well, he's the one that introduced the song to the world. And I don't know if you would know who the Carpenters were. Karen and Richard Carpenter.
I think the Carpenters version is the one that was familiar to me.
Well, see what they did, since his name was Herb Alpert, they had this prop, this big giant H. So he was sitting on the line where, it had the letter H. And he had his trumpet because he was a trumpeter. So he sang the words to the song, and then he played that melody on his trumpet, and it was a big, big hit back at that time.
I feel like I've seen more Herb Albert and Tijuana Brass records at thrift stores than any other artist.
Well, yeah,
There's millions of them.
he was in his heyday probably in the mid-'60s, I'd say.
Mhm.
Because there's a famous game show called The Dating Game. I don't know if you ever heard of it, the original dating game. They used the music of Herb Alpert. And ladies and gentlemen, here she is! And they'd have the music of Herb Alpert in the background. But that was a different time period. So Jessie, let's start with you first. Now, are you from Missoula?
Yeah, I grew up in Missoula until about 6th grade, and then
Okay.
I moved down to the Bitterroot Valley and lived graduated from Corvallis High School.
Okay.
And then I moved back to Missoula a few years after that, and I've been here ever since.
Good. And you, what are you most interested in? Illustration or portraits or watercolor? You do all three of them, right?
Right. I would say illustration. I really enjoy doing surrealism and
Okay.
just really dreamy, kind of abstract thoughts and processes.
Okay. And how long have you been doing these artworks here?
So I've been doing art pretty much my entire life. It's what I've always been really passionate about growing up.
Okay.
I actually, when I moved back to Missoula, I was pursuing a tattoo apprenticeship.
Okay.
And I did that for 3 years, and then decided it wasn't for me and left to pursue fine art
Fine art.
instead.
Okay, and if you two want to ask each other's questions pertaining to what we're talking about, that's fine too. And Nathan, you're more into. Are you a filmmaker?
Yeah.
Okay, and how long have you been doing filming? How long have you been filming?
You know, I haven't really been doing it myself that long. I was a film festival coordinator for several years.
Okay.
And it was,
is that here in
No,
Montana?
this was out in Far West Texas, Marfa, Texas, the name of this little art colony that's out there. And I became more interested in that. Just we would watch the submissions, you know, student films, amateur films, hundreds of thousands of submissions, and it was really cool. You know, I got interested in the visual effects technology and things like that.
And also you do photography too, right?
That's
photography.
Right. Yeah.
What kind of pictures have you done in the past?
Well, in the past couple of years, I was living in a camper van down the Rocky Mountains, more or less, in the hermit in the wilderness kind of.
So you like taking pictures of nature?
That's right. Yeah, birds and wildflowers and things like that.
Excellent.
Nice.
Gave me an idea. See if you know this song.
I recognize the melody again, but I can't think of the name of it.
It's called El Paso.
Oh, there you go. Out
Texas,
in the
yeah.
West Texas.
Yeah, you
town
mentioned
of
Texas,
El
yeah.
Paso.
A famous singer named Marty Robbins made that song famous a very long time ago. I don't even think you two were here when that song
I've
came
totally
out.
heard the song, though. It's so cool. It's a great
Well,
song.
they like rerun it in the radios now and
Yeah.
stuff. But Marty Robbins was one of the best country singers of the past that ever lived. Probably second to Johnny Cash. I don't know if you would know Johnny Cash.
Oh, of course,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so Marty Robbins was in that category. But in the 60s, they had a lot of country singers. It was Marty Robbins, it was Dolly Parton when she was young, and let's see if I can think of some more. Just off the top of my head, Bill Anderson. You probably won't know him.
Mhm.
Yeah, they were all like country singers, and then before that was Hank Williams.
Hank Williams.
Yeah, he just I think he just started the whole country phase.
I like that old storytelling country music.
That's the way it used to be,
Yeah.
because country music now sounds like a lot like rock and roll,
It
which
does,
I guess it's
yes.
okay. It's more modern. You have Blake Shelton. I think he's a country singer.
Yeah, I'm not
He
sure.
judges that talent show, I think, these days now.
Oh, right. America's Got Talent. Or something.
Yeah,
Mhm.
one of those shows like that. But he does country, and Garth Brooks, they do country,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's more like modern. Whereas in the past, when you listen to Hank Williams or Minnie Pearl, these are all like country singers.
I like that old stuff because every song told a story.
Yeah, it was like
Relate
really
to it.
storytelling,
Yeah.
and times change, and so I guess I don't know much about country music. I guess they have to keep up. So
I would think there'd be an opportunity there for a new artist to come along and grab the legacy of that old country music.
well, I'm sure as every generation comes in, the music gets more modern and so on. Let's try this song here. See if you know this one. You recognize it?
I recognize it, but I can't remember the name of it right now.
You might know it now.
Is it Taylor Swift?
Close.
Is it I Will Always Love You?
You're close.
I know the song, but I don't know the artist or title apparently.
You recognize?
I know that
Miley Cyrus, Wrecking Ball.
That's what it is. All right.
That's a short version of
Now I
Wrecking
feel
Ball.
embarrassed.
But
one. How do you learn you read music or you just listen by ear? Or?
no, there's a trick to that. Let me put it this way. There's a lot of styles of piano playing. The traditional style is what's called classical music. Like, for example, you may have heard this. I won't do the whole thing because it'll take too long. Have you heard this
Yeah.
song? This is Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. I'll just do the intro. But see, the point that I'm making is when that music came out, that was their popular music of that time period. And then as the generations went by, it started changing. I'll give a brief music history lesson. They had what was called 5 periods of music history. Have you ever heard that term?
No.
They had what was called the medieval period. They had the Renaissance period. They had what was called the Baroque era. And then it was the classical era, like Chopin, Mozart, and so on, leading up to the Romantic era. And around the time the Romantic era came out, they had like music like of the 1910s and 1920s. Louis Armstrong, I don't know if you would know.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff, you know, they had all that. And then as time changed, American music was really evolving. So it just expanded over the centuries instead of playing just this Bach, you know, Prelude in C, you know. Have you heard it?
Yes.
I'll stop there. But as the centuries go by, music just grew and expanded. And then by the 1930s and 40s, they had what was called big band music. Ella Fitzgerald, Mel Torme, Glenn Miller, and you know, those kind of Harry James, all the rest of them. And then by the time the 50s came out, it just did a total change. Because see, prior to early rock and roll music, big band music was so structured. Like when you listen to the big band, Count Basie and Duke Ellington, it was just such structured music. But then when the early rock and roll came out, like the Big Bopper, Little Richard, it was simple music, and the teenagers just loved it. It didn't have all this structure. It was just like a little verse and a little melody or a hook, they called it, and the kids loved it. They just ate that up. And then by the time the 60s came with the British invasion, you may have heard of this, the Beatles,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
the Turtles, the Animals, Jim Morrison, the Doors, and of course Mick Jagger. it changed. So that's kind of a brief, generic music history lesson. And then of course now we have jazz like Miles Davis. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You know, that kind of jazz, and it's just keeps evolving and stuff like that. So that's kind of a brief history lesson. See if you know this song here.
The Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Painted Black.
That's it. Short version of Painted Black. Let's get back to you. Now, your family is here in Missoula right now? This is home base for you?
My family is mostly just around Montana.
Okay, that's good. And so your main thing is all this illustration and portraits and watercolors and things. Do you have some
I
of
left
your
it over
artwork?
there.
Well, go ahead. You can just squeeze
All right.
through there. And we can do it the old-fashioned way. Just walk up to the camera and see if it shows. And Nathan, let's see, what else can I ask you? How did you get started in photography and stuff like that?
You know,
Did you go to college or school or anything, or
I
did you?
did. I studied architecture in college,
Okay.
but I never actually really practiced in that field. But I had become interested in photography in high school. There was a door in the library of my high school. This was in Central Texas.
Okay.
And I became curious as what's behind that door, and no one ever went there. And I asked around, and sure enough, there was a little dark room back there that nobody was using. So
Okay.
I had gone back in there, and I got to a situation where I was taking an art class, and the art teacher would just let me go to the dark room for the entire period.
Yeah, and just work with film.
Yeah.
Because they used to do it the old-fashioned way before the computers came out,
That's
if I
right.
recall.
Yeah, we would
They
get
went
the-
into a little dark room with the
The chemicals and the projector and all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
So I got started with that, but obviously now it's digital. But
Well, yeah, but I mean before digital. Sometimes some of the older stuff is always the best
yeah,
and stuff like that.
All right, so you want me to just go to the camera?
Let's see. Yeah, let's see if it'll work. Hold it. It might. Here, let me. I don't want to get you. What do you think?
nice. Frida.
So yes, this is one of my most popular selling portraits. It's a portrait of Frida Kahlo.
Yeah, you can stand on this side here and
Okay.
get the camera there. What am I holding? I'm gonna let you do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are two
No, I'm
watercolor portraits.
Yes.
I have like 6 in the series. And they're
Excellent.
famous visual visual artists. This is Frida Kahlo, like I said before, famous Mexican artist. And then this is Yayoi Kusama, and she's a famous Japanese artist. She's the only one still living in the series that I painted.
She's the polka dot lady.
Yeah. She does like full room installations. There's a documentary about her and her work on Netflix called Kusama Infinity, and I definitely recommend that you check it out. And then these are more like the illustration type work I do. Oh, I grabbed 2 of those.
What I'm going to have you do is when you finish showing it on camera, I'll have you sit down and talk about each one so that to make sure your voice picks up.
Oh, right.
And stuff like
Okay.
that.
And this is like a slug on a Fabergé egg.
Mm-hmm.
I really like using Fabergé eggs in my work.
Good. I got a better idea too. Why don't you have a seat and you explain it more and I'll hold it.
Okay.
And that way you can tell the television audience what that is. And then
Let me
Nathan will get
grab
back to you in a moment.
Oh, no rush. Yeah.
Let me swap one of those out.
Okay. I should have thought of that. If I go up like this and you can tell the audience, let's just start with this one here. There you go.
So that's a slug on a Fabergé egg, and the title of that one is Garden Prints.
Okay.
What is it about the Fabergé egg that fascinates you?
I just love like how fancy they are.
Mhm.
You can really do, like you can kind of create your own
Right.
and make them as fancy as you want. And then that is from my Inktober 2017 series.
Okay.
With Inktober, which is happening right now actually, every day for the month of October, you're challenged to do a pen and ink illustration.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
And they
catch that.
release a prompt list.
Uh-huh.
And so all of the pieces from that series are by the one word prompt that was given for that day.
Okay.
So that one is titled Long.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Are you working from like a picture or just freehanding that from your imagination?
So I'll use a reference image.
Do you have to have a photograph of the person before you convert it to watercolors?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have some of those Liberace pictures I can send you later on too to do a watercolor. This is going to be my 10th year playing the piano at the mall, and so for the occasion, that's why I'm going to become Liberace. Now, you probably won't know Liberace. He was a famous pianist.
I know
from
who
the
he is
past.
for sure, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking 1950s.
Yeah.
I wasn't even around
He's a
then.
very extravagant individual with
Yeah,
his style.
he had this flamboyant image. Now, this is just kind of a test. I'll have the rings on. He had like these rings.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll have the glitter on my shoes and all that when time comes. So maybe we can capture one of the costumes. There's a few pictures have been taken, like these test pictures. So this is one of them. But anyway, yeah, he was a very flamboyant, they call it, pianist. Way before Elton John started doing stuff.
Right.
Way before Elvis.
He must have been a big inspiration to Elton John, don't you think? Like,
Probably because, see, in 1952, it was unheard of that anybody would sit and watch a television show of a guy playing the piano. But see, television was new in the 50s, too. See, prior to that, they had all the movie stars, like, I don't know if you've heard of Clark Gable and
Mhm.
Gone with the Wind. You remember those movies? And American audiences always went to the theater. And it was a big deal because there was no television back then. And then when the medium of television started coming out, some of the movie executives were uncomfortable because they didn't want their stars on television because they thought television was going to be a big fad. You know, like the Pet Rock. Remember the Pet Rock? How that when that came out.
that's what they always say about new technology. Say, oh,
Yeah.
the internet, nothing's going to come of it. you
And
know.
but the American audiences started thinking, well, why should we spend $10 or however much it was at that time period to see a famous person when they can watch it free at home? And so the movie execs then, they were like really freaking out. And there were a few comedians of the past, you may have never heard of them, like George Burns
Mhm.
and Milton Berle. And they had the common sense to get on that new medium. Bob Hope, he was another one.
Yep.
And that's how their name got plastered all everywhere because television was new. And so that's kind of a brief history. Now it's tough to get on TV these days because you got like 200 channels now.
Yeah.
Cable and everything else. But back in the 50s, it wasn't very many television shows. It was new. And the movie stars that got on television, they got even more known, more exposure, stuff like that. But that's kind of a generic. There's more to it, but that's a generic version of it. So now with this computer age, like what you guys are doing now, your work, you can do it on YouTube, I think it is, and Facebook and the computer, and with SoundCloud and all the rest of those. You know, you can do your stuff there. So you have anything on some of your watercolors on YouTube and stuff like that?
Not necessarily my watercolors. I do have a channel on YouTube where I do a lot of like time-lapse videos, so it's just videos sped up of me drawing. So it's the artwork coming to life.
And do you have any
Not
of your...
Not a lot. I have like a kind of like an account that I just put some kind of test videos and things, but I'm actually starting a whole new kind of chapter of creative productivity here in Missoula. So
well, your association with this MCAT studio and Scott, he'll be able to help you with all that stuff too, and so on. And you never know where it might lead, kind of thing, stuff like that. And you know, a half hour's almost gone by already.
Man,
I told you this goes by very quickly once you start. So I'm judging it by this clock here. So we still got about 20 minutes left. So, Nathan, what else can you tell me about yourself? Just as far as pictures and so on?
Well, what I'm trying to do here in Missoula, I moved into town, I've got a part-time job and all that, but I'm really focusing on putting out some kind of future positive sci-fi. One thing I had noticed...
Science fiction,
That's science fiction.
Okay.
Working in film festivals, there's a lot of people working in science fiction, but it seems like very kind of dark visions of the future predominate what people are thinking about, you know? And I'm thinking like, hey, what would the future look like if it was really awesome?
Well, science fiction shows today are probably, I guess they try to gear it to what they think it would be for real, whereas in the past, it was just imagination, like Star Trek. I don't know if you're familiar with Star Trek.
Of course,
or Space 1999.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that show?
I don't remember that one, no.
Well, basically, let's see, that came out probably in the late 60s, so they were in the year 1999, and they were on the moon, and you know, they had like their trick photography at that time period.
Yep.
And what happened was there was an explosion on the moon which caused the moon to shift from Earth's orbit, and that's how they got trapped.
Oh man.
So the moon was floating out in space away from... It's all science fiction.
That sounds cold, very cold.
Yeah, but it worked in its time period. Prior to science fiction, they had what was Westerns. They had a lot of Westerns television. And they had a lot of, I call it family comedy shows, but not like today. They were just like unrealistic, you might say, like Leave It to Beaver. I don't know if you're familiar with, you know, those kind of shows.
Oh yeah.
And then by the time the Brady Bunch came out, it started getting a little bit more realistic. And then of course you watch Married with Children, and that's so dysfunctional, and The Simpsons. But yeah, that's our time period. But in the past, it was different. You watch Gilligan's Island now, and you'll be like, I can't believe I'm watching that show.
Yeah.
But it's a good escape.
I mean, that's kind of what inspires me too, is to say like, a lot of people are going for like realism, the way they're using special effects software and things like that, and say like, there's a vast field of potential what you can do with that creative tool outside the bounds of realism, more expressive effects, and you know, so I'm kind of trying to push it back in that direction where I'm not as concerned with realism as I am like
just imagination and you know that sort of thing. And I think that's good you can use your imagination to escape, you know, because the world is bad enough as it is, always has been, you know.
Right.
So I think that's what was fun with the movies, even the movies of the past. Charlie Chaplin, you know, they had those non-talking films where they used to have the films and they had the words on the screen.
Yep.
And then of course when the talking pictures came out, they had to convert to that.
I feel like there's something to be said too, to say like, you watch the old Star Trek episodes, they have the little tricorder that was undreamed of technology in those days, to say that you could hold that in your hand, and now we have cell phones that is literally basically what the
and
tricorder
that's why it was
was,
so
you know?
groundbreaking. And then another thing too, you know, with Skype, you know how you can see the person. I don't know if you know the cartoon The Jetsons. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that seems so unheard of when that cartoon was in its heyday, that, you know, you could look at the person on the screen. It seems so futuristic. And now, in 2019, you can get on Skype and talk halfway around the world like in seconds.
Yep.
But 20 or 30 years from now, no telling what the technology will be like
No
at
doubt.
that time.
For sure.
No telling. But
Probably holograms.
Yeah.
actually, that's
Yeah,
interesting that you said that,
three-dimensional
because
holograms.
they're sort of doing that now. They're
Mhm.
experimenting with that. That was on the World News. That was on CBS World News.
Really?
Yeah. You probably won't know her, Maria Callas. Have you ever heard the name?
I've heard the name.
She was a famous opera singer of the past. Now they have these like images where you can see Maria Callas on stage, and of course they use her to take music, and it's kind of like generic version, but it looks real. So, but who knows with
They
the
did
technology?
that with Tupac a couple years back at Coachella too, if I remember.
Yeah,
correctly.
it was-
They had a Tupac hologram on stage.
Yeah, but as the technology gets better, it'll be just like Star Trek: The Next Generation. You know how they have the hologram images
Yeah.
and so on. So, it's coming.
Ooh,
It's
I
coming.
hope for teleportation.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe like they do that on Star Trek all the time. You know, they transport people. They like unscramble their molecules and put them. But that's all the fun of science
How
fiction.
awesome
You
would that
know,
be?
imagine what that'd be like for real. You know, there was an old Japanese television show, Ultraman. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Well, Ultraman had these powers, and he could like, you know, teleport himself from the moon to the Earth like within seconds. It's all science fiction, but Ultraman was this big giant superhero like Godzilla, and he would fight the monsters like Godzilla, Mothra, and all the rest of them, and
Mhm.
protect the Earth. But it's science fiction, you know. But he had these powers, and they were like more. His style was more like martial arts. Like he like do some kung fu and the monsters. It was silly, but it was fun, silly. And then he would kill the monster to protect Tokyo. Why is Tokyo always the target in the movies? If you watch any of those movies of the past, they always, any monster movie, they always attack Tokyo.
Yeah.
I don't know, whoever, I guess, created science fiction at that time period said, hey, let's pick on Tokyo here.
I saw a petition a while back. They said like please stop attacking New York in the movie. Same thing.
Yeah.
Monsters always attacking New York.
It's either New York
Catastrophes,
or
like-
Tokyo, yeah, usually.
Yeah.
And some of these movies, oh gosh, I have to use my imagination now. Mothra was like this, he looked like a worm, giant worm that eats buildings, and you had to be there. How about Planet of the Apes? You familiar with the original Planet of the
Yes.
Apes, Charlton Heston?
Yeah.
Hey, did you ever see that, the original Planet of the Apes?
I think I remember seeing bits and pieces of it.
That was groundbreaking in that time period. That came out in the 70s. You know how like how we have like animals in zoos and we do taxidermies and stuff
Right.
and all that. Well, it was the reverse.
Right, they were doing it.
The
to
monkeys were doing it to
humans.
humans, and they had this music. They had this really chilling music with these scenes, and the apes had their laws and their culture, and they could talk, and humans couldn't talk. It was the complete reversal in science fiction, and it worked. They made 5 Planet of the Apes films. Now they've got like all these fancy ones. Mark Wahlberg, the
Oh,
actor.
right. They've been rebooting
Yeah,
it, haven't they?
rebooting them. Yeah, Planet of the Apes. But the original was Charlton Heston, the actor that played Moses in the Ten
Mhm.
Commandments.
They had that iconic final scene where he's walking on the beach, right?
Yeah, and what was interesting about that, they were time travelers. Everybody's always time travelers, you know.
Mhm.
They go in space and they're like in frozen state, and so they only age like a few minutes after traveling millions of miles. So it's always the same plot line. So Charlton Heston was in space, and when he lands on the Earth, but he doesn't realize it's like 3,000 years in the future. So that's kind of what it was, and the apes took over the Earth. So
That's crazy.
yeah, they were shooting guns, riding horses, and they were surgeons, and you know they had this whole ape city.
That was kind of the big reveal at the end of the first one, though, right? When he saw the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, when he saw the Statue of Liberty.
He fell to his knees and he realized that he was on Earth. Like,
yeah, he realized he was on Earth. He thought he was on another planet, but he wasn't. And so that was the original Planet of the Apes. And then in the third series, the two talking apes that save Charlton Heston's character's life, they go back in time. They escape because the Earth exploded. It's all science fiction.
Wow.
yeah.
And so the two apes, they go back in time because the shock waves from the explosion plunged them back into the past. And so the people of the Earth, they just thought it was a novelty at first, but there was this one scientist that freaked out. If you let these talking monkeys live, they'll take over the Earth. So what the mother ape did, she switched babies at the last second because she knew she was going to be killed. So that scientist kills the two apes from the future and a chimpanzee baby thinking it was their offspring. But the mother switched. So when that baby grew up, he was ticked because the humans killed his parents. And he took over the Earth anyway, so... But that's all science fiction.
Destiny, yeah.
Yeah, so... But I know it's silly and impossible, but that's just the science fiction movies for you. That's just the way it is, you know. Okay, Jessie, anything else you want to tell me about yourself? As far as some of the other hobbies? You have hobbies and things?
Art is my main hobby.
What about you, Nathan?
That's all I really do.
Do you have any hobbies, like cooking or anything?
I like to cook. I like to do yoga, stretch. Yeah.
Yeah, exercises. That.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Jack LaLanne?
Yes.
He didn't start that. There was no such thing as yoga in his time, and they didn't have like the steroids and all. He just was a guy that ate right, and he just did a lot of push-ups when he was a young man, and he had his exercise show, and they had his organ music in the background, and he would just do one-handed push-ups on television and just impress everybody. But everybody got impatient, and now they want to take steroids and bulk up quickly.
Yeah.
And there's always complications. But when Jack LaLanne was alive, he did it naturally, slowly over a period of years. And it saved his life, too, because he had some health issues prior to working out naturally, eating right.
He lived for a long time, didn't he?
Yeah, he lived to be something like 93, 94.
Yeah.
And when he was 70, they had him out there in the harbor, I think out in New York. He was like swimming, pushing a boat behind him.
Whoa.
And but he was incredibly strong. He looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger and all the rest, but he just did it naturally, eating right, exercising sit-ups and what have you. Everybody now, they just do whatever they do, and they want to see how big they can get quickly. And I don't know a lot about that, but that's the way it was in our time. But before that, it was painstaking sit-ups, crunches.
Have you ever had any bodybuilders on your show?
Not this show, but I have a friend, when I was in high school, he was scrawny like me. And he went on to go out for the title, Mr. Universe title. Cause
really now?
He worked, I don't want to mention his name, but I've known him since high school. He worked out naturally. And by the time he was a senior in high school, he was like Popeye, it was amazing, just
wow.
Huge. Hey, Asaph, what are you doing? Oh, I don't know, just practicing the piano or whatever. And he spent like 4 years working out. And the coach that we had was Mr. Olympia in 1965 when I was in high school. Big guy. And that wasn't for me, but he used to say, "Hey, Asaph, let's play chess," because I used to be on a chess team. I was like a nerd, a half-assed nerd. And I could whoop this coach in chess anytime. He'd be like, "How you doing, Asaph?" Doing those little weights. Weights like big, heavier than me. And he's just making it look easy. "Okay, coach, that's for you, not me."
Yeah.
But he was a nice guy. But I graduated in '76, so we're talking way back.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be 61 this month.
Congratulations.
So thank you.
Happy birthday to you.
So thank you. So I hope you can catch some pictures. I can send you some pictures of some of these costumes. You want to create a Liberace. And it starts on the 29th of November. If you want to come out there and catch it. They have a little upright piano that they painted. They're calling it the Elton John piano.
Mm-hmm.
So with these
Nice.
flamboyant looking Elton John piano, it'll work. And I just thought maybe you wanted to capture some of that. I'll be there literally all day on Black Friday, from 7 a.m. till the time it closes.
Wow.
It's a long day.
Yeah.
Well, I space it out carefully. But see, that gives me a chance to expose these costumes and stuff. And the news, they always wait till like hours later for they show up anyway.
Mhm.
Stuff like that. So I thought if you wanted to capture somebody, you're more than welcome.
Yeah.
And of course, it's free and you can come.
Oh, I'd love to come see that, yeah.
Yeah, you know where Cafe Dolce is at the mall?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'll have the piano roped off there and so on. So it'll be
Nice.
fun. And I'm going to be Liberace.
You like to be in the public eye?
Yeah, it's fun. Well, when I was younger, I did the Vegas stuff and all that, but for me, it wasn't what I thought it was cracked up to be. It was good work, but the lifestyle. I was 26 years old when I used to play in Vegas, and my old boss, we're still in contact after all these years. His name was Pat Guidry, and he had his name. He used to sing at the Riviera Hotel with people like Tom Jones. You probably won't know them.
Oh, I know Tom Jones.
You know, it's not unusual.
Oh, yeah.
And his name was on the marquee with those people at that time period. And so I was like the baby of the bunch then. These people are like experienced, and I used to think, I can't believe these guys chose me to be part of this at the time. But that was years ago. And we got about 10 minutes left. This just went by so quickly.
Mhm.
Is there anything else you'd like to show while we're here?
I mean, I can share some stuff I have going on
Sure.
artistically.
That's fine. That'll be fine.
Tonight is the closing reception for the Gallery of Visual Art show that I'm in, and that's at the university.
Oh, okay. Well, the thing is, that'll take place by the time this airs, but I'll give you a DVD of this when we're done.
Right.
You can take it with you, and then I'll have Scott look at everything. And you
Sounds good.
feel free to use it. It may be a good resume
Oh, I
for
will.
future stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah, the name of this show is called Asaph Cafe.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we used to be on backdrops of cafes, and that just gets kind of humdrum, though.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. This is way more stimulating because you never know what backdrop we're going to use. When I did this show 4 years ago, it was just those two brick walls and that table.
Mm-hmm.
This tablecloth is a signature tablecloth. It's on every episode of this show that I've ever done.
Really?
And back then, we used to have real food because I used to play at the Missoula Senior Center. So they used to provide real food, but it just got to the point where it was messing up the studio with the grease.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have fried chicken and stuff like that. And it just got to the point where we had to just get it down to sandwiches and, of course, these chips here.
What's the story of the tablecloth? Why?
It's just something we just decided to use, and it just became a fixture.
It's tradition now.
Tradition, yeah.
Mhm.
When I first started this show, I used to just walk downtown and just grab people at random. And when I first created this show, I thought, oh, who's going to want to watch a show of a guy sitting behind a piano just talking fun things? But it worked. It worked. And we're starting our 5th year, and it's very popular.
Nice.
So I'm really humbled by that. And I think I shared with both of you, this lady in her 70s walked up to me one day, young man, I like your show. It's just so fun to just watch. And we had a guy on here one time. We got on the subject of superheroes. And he was a big guy. And I thought the subject was, who's your favorite superhero? If you could be a superhero, who would you be? And I thought he was going to say Superman or Batman or Spider-Man, He said Wonder Woman. And it took everything in me to keep him laughing. So I started focusing on the attributes of Wonder Woman, and we had this conversation about Wonder Woman. So it was interesting. You know the history of Wonder Woman, don't you?
I don't.
In the 1940s, they had World War II, and that was a very uncomfortable part of human history. So the person that created Wonder Woman, she was fighting the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
That was the original premise of Wonder Woman.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, fighting the Nazis. She was on Paradise Island, and they were watching World War II, and the people of Paradise Island like these very strong women with these superpowers. So they sent Wonder Woman to the Earth.
Wow.
And that's how the whole series started. And she had these bracelets, like when they shoot bullets at her, she can deflect it because she can see real fast. So they'd be like shooting her. And that's kind of a brief history of Wonder Woman, fighting the Nazis.
Are you a comic book guy yourself?
Yeah, I was really into comic books when I was growing up because that's all they had. Superman
I
and
was
Batman.
too. I would, my mom had a sandwich shop that was like a couple blocks from the library.
Uh-huh.
So I'd walk down there, check out as many comic books as I could, and read them all day.
Yeah. Superman came out, I think, around 1932, something like that, the original Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just like invincible. There was no kryptonite in those early episodes, but as time goes by, you know, they had more writers and to make it more interesting. Did you see any of the Superman movies at all?
I saw some of the old Christopher Reeve ones, yeah.
Those are pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Now, before Christopher Reeves, they had an actor named George Reeves. You probably never heard of him. Black and white television series.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he was just an actor, so they had a bodysuit to get the broad shoulders. And by the time Christopher Reeve's version came out, it was a little bit more fancy with the technology. And in the 1940s, when they started doing Superman in the film, they had an actor named Kirk Alyn. And they didn't have the technology, so what they would do is they would have these scenes with this actor, and when he would fly, it would turn into a comic, a cartoon. You know, it would be a literal cartoon. And then when the cartoon character would land, it would turn back into the actor who played the original Superman. That was Kirk Alyn. They didn't have much technology then in the 1940s. So that's kind of a brief history of television. But TV is so fancy now, really fancy. These 200 channels. See if you know the song. It's an old police drama.
I recognize the melody again, but
Hill Street Blues.
Hill Street Blues.
That was. See, as far as police dramas, they were tame in comparison to today. Like when you watch Law and Order, people are getting their throats all cut and yeah, it's gross. But when they first started doing it, it was very, very tame. They had a show called Beretta. The actor Robert Blake, he was one of the original Little Rascals when he was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of was mild and primitive, you know, shoot 'em up, police drama. And then as time went by, they got more fancier, like with the Hill Street Blues, and they got more street savvy instead of just imagination, so that more people could relate. So that's kind of a brief history of
What would you, do you have an
dramas.
opinion as to the greatest television theme song of all time?
The greatest television theme song? Oh gosh, that would be a hard question to answer because there's so many. There's westerns, there's soap operas, and the soap operas of the past. They used to wear suit and ties. The gentlemen, they didn't have. It wasn't like the soap operas like today, when you look at them.
Mm-hmm.
See, here's one you might recognize. I'll just do a piece of it.
Is that As the World Turns?
Close.
Young and the Restless.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Actually, its name is called Nadia's Theme. I don't know if you would know this. In 1976, there was a Russian gymnast named Nadia Comaneci, and she was the first person to ever score a perfect 10 in the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything she did, 10, 10. Judges like freaking out. So somebody composed a song called Nadia's Theme. Eventually, they attached it onto the Young and the Restless. So that's kind of the history of how they got that. And of course, Nadia eventually grew up and had a family of her own. But she's the first person. And now you have, what's her name? Simone Biles, the young African-American woman that did like what the 5 flips or whatever it is.
Yeah, I remember
First
the
person
video.
to
Landed it.
and nailed it too. It's amazing because as time goes by, they make these gymnastics things more difficult, and it appeals to, I guess, the younger generation. Peggy Fleming, she was one of the early figure skaters, and they didn't have all the Salchows and stuff like Christy Yamaguchi and Michelle Kwan. They was just like basic flips and or spinning around, but that was considered groundbreaking then. But now, they make you do everything. They make you flip up in the air, fly, twist backwards, and so on. And you have to do it when you're young. And now that Simone Biles or whatever her name is, now that she's created the first one to do 5 flips or whatever, now everybody's gonna be trying to do it. And there'll be some young person come along that'll do, oh, I'm going to do 7 one day maybe.
Yeah, it's amazing they keep pushing the envelope that the human body can continue to like do better and better as generations pass. So.
Yeah, so that's kind of, it's the same with any sport, tennis, football, even boxing. You know, when Muhammad Ali was in his heyday, they did 15 rounds. They don't do that anymore. So.
You know, that reminds me, speaking of like piano artists, are you familiar with Chili Gonzalez?
I've heard the name.
That's such a great stuff. He plays like kind of, you know, Chopin romantic piano pieces. He's put out 3 albums now, and I listen to that stuff.
Yeah.
I really love his music. It's just solo piano music. It's really, really good contemporary stuff. But wow, Chili Gonzalez is awesome.
Well, we're almost out of time. I'll start with you. Any final words you'd like to say? I appreciate you being on today, and
likewise,
it is kind of primitive, basic. I wish I could have had more goodies for you, but.
It's okay.
And I wanted to focus more on you. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you guys a tour when we sign out of here, and I'll show you what it's going to look like on that monitor in the other room there. I use this as a guide. See, it's kind of fuzzy, but it'll be crystal clear, really crystal clear.
Nice.
So it was fun being on the moon, and there's the American flag. I can't even imagine what that must have been like for real when they went to the moon. I forget what year that was, and they had a reporter named Walter Cronkite. You probably won't know.
69, I think it was.
Something like that. He covered it. And I think he worked for CBS News at that time. It was different news coverage then. You look at the news today, everybody's fighting one another and so on, trying to attack one another. But back at that time was a different thing. They just covered stories. And even and the news reporters, if they didn't like a person, they were professional enough to put that aside and get the story. Now these days, everybody's damaging images and stuff like that, and it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same. That's why with this show here, it's just kind of fun, silly. I just let people come on and talk. All right, I'm going to play one last song, and the first one of you to get it, it's a point. So let me think of something. Okay.
I'm crazy.
Yeah, that's called Crazy.
Yeah.
Let's see, would you like to say hi to your family? You can just look at that camera and say hi to your family.
Hi, family.
Anyone you want to say hi to?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Mom, Dad,
okay.
yeah.
Well, let's sign out of here. So anyway, through the magic of green screen technology, and you're going to be doing a lot of that soon.
That's
too.
right. Yep.
And feel free to look at other Asaph Cafe episodes.
Potentially in this very room, yes.
Yeah, in this room. Everybody has their style. When we were first doing this show, I tried to have like 2 or 3 cameras we can get close-ups, and that was too difficult to get someone to commit to do that every week. So I just settled for the wide pan, and it's fun, stuff like that. People can still talk about whatever. And I wanted to talk to you more about capturing this stuff after we sign off.
Yeah, you
Stuff
brought
like
my
that.
notebook so I can take notes.
Yeah, it's fine. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I am Asaph Adonai, Liberace. We're on the moon, and we can breathe perfectly fine on the moon. Only in the moon, in the, imagination.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a show called Focus on the Family?
Mm-mm.
It's a children's radio drama, and there's a guy named John Avery Whitaker. He created this time machine called the Imagination Station. And so he serves ice cream to the kids in the land of Odyssey. You have to use your imagination. And they always go back in time in this imagination station. Like they'll go back to Bible times, and they have like these voice actors that pretend to be like, say, Samson or something. It's pretty cool. So, but I just wonder if you ever heard of that. Yeah, it's just radio broadcast. They did a lot of radio shows before television came out. The Green Hornet, I don't know if you ever heard of that. Green Hornet and Tato.
I did, yeah. War of the Worlds and all that. Huh?
Yeah, and Fibber, McGee, and Molly. There's radio broadcasts. Like they would have actors reading scripts and radio, and American families would sit in front of their radio, and you use your imagination.
Right.
that's the way it was. We're spoiled now. We have Skype.
Podcasts are popular though.
Yeah.
Getting more so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it'll just get more and more technical as time goes by. All right, well, let me introduce you once again. On my left, Jessie Smith, illustrator, and watercolors, and of course, once this is on YouTube and so on, you can do all your advertising. We just can't do it physically.
Oh no, that's
on camera. And of course, we have Nathan Stuvee, right?
Yep.
And a filmmaker and a photographer and nature and so on. And so I thank you both for letting me take time to talk to you, and you can talk about some of the things you do.
Yeah,
And then the final thing I always say after I introduce everybody, I just say, until our next show, Maranatha. And then we just fade out. I do the first part of this. Now just sit right there until I shut everything down. Don't move, okay?
That's the most awkward moment of all.
Right?
Man, these are some cute breaking crackers. All right.
This is what it's going to look like. See, there's a vast difference. I use that as just a guide, but the DVD and Facebook and so on, it'll be the first thing I see your. So what I